This is the FT of school property. The supervisor yelled, pulling the lunch bag from Mrs. Evans, shaking hands as the starving boy looked at his sunken eyes, welled up with tears behind them. Staff looked away in silence. Mrs. Evans' warm smile disappeared, replaced by a misery only she could perceive. Most of the others just ignored that lonely boy until one afternoon, when a limousine and 3 black SUVs drove up to the school gates, and the whole cafeteria fell silent. Who was this boy, and why would a simple moment of kindness leave the powerful completely stunned? Welcome to Deep Story Dispatch. Crestview Elementary School sat on the outskirts of a quiet Illinois suburb where autumn leaves now scattered across the playground in 2010 inside its cafeteria. The gentle hum of conversation mingled with the clatter of trays. Jane Evans, at 54, had served as the school's lunch lady for 22 years, her silver hair always neatly tucked beneath a hairnet, her slender frame moving efficiently between stations. She was legendary for knowing every child's name, allergies, and little preferences. The boy who needed his peas separated from his carrots. The girl who wouldn't eat crust, "Good morning, sweetie," she'd say as each child passed through her line, often slipping extra fruit to those with hollow cheeks. Jane lived alone in a modest apartment, rarely called in sick, and was always first to arrive, last to leave. Teachers often found her humming while prepping meals before dawn. In contrast, 9-year-old Ethan Miller seemed to fold into himself at the far end of the lunch table. His threadbare clothes hung from his small frame, his eyes downcast as other children instinctively kept their distance. He rarely picking at his food, slowly saving bits in his pockets. The tension had been building for weeks since the district implemented strict new food waste policies. That Wednesday, Jane had discreetly slipped a paper bag with leftover sandwiches and fruit into Ethan's backpack. When a shadow fell across them again, Mrs. Evans. "That's theft of school property." Frank Pearson, the new district supervisor, snatched the bag from her trembling hands. Ethan stood frozen, his sunken eyes welling with tears around them. Other staff members averted their gaze. Regular cafeteria visitors watched with sympathy, but remained silent. Jane forced a smile despite the pain in her eyes. "It's all right, honey," she whispered to Ethan, who looked ready to bolt. Frank marched Jane to his office, where he made her sign a formal warning. "One more violation, and you're terminated. 22 years or not." As Jane walked back to the cafeteria, she found Ethan's table empty. His absence a silent accusation in the bustling room. No one knew this small humiliation would soon echo in the halls of power. Tension gripped the cafeteria in the days following the incident. The new administration had slashed budgets across the district, implementing a zero-tolerance policy against distributing leftover food. Rules exist for a reason, Frank reminded staff during morning meetings, his thin lips barely moving. Food safety regulations protect children in the district from liability. Behind his back, everyone knew the truth. It was about cutting costs, not safety. Frank installed security cameras that seemed to focus particularly on Jane's station. He conducted meticulous food inventory checks, his clipboard ever present, as he tallied each apple and milk carton with suspicious precision. Jane became more cautious, but not deterred. She secretly wrapped sandwiches and fruit in paper napkins, slipping them into Ethan's backpack. When no one watched, just leftovers. "Don't worry," she'd whisper when Ethan's worried eyes met hers. Kyle, a younger cafeteria worker, noticed but kept silent. "I'd help if I could," he confided during a quiet moment, "but I need this job for college." Jane patted his hand. "Sometimes looking away is its own kind of help." Whispers spread among some teachers. "Jane's breaking rules," one said during lunch. "We all have struggling students. Why help just one?" another added. "If everyone broke protocol for their favorites, where would we be?" Frank called Jane to an emergency meeting. That Friday, the principal sat uncomfortably to the side as Frank slapped a folder on the desk. "You're on your last warning," he said, voice rising. "Next time you're out, 22 years won't save you later." Jane sobbed quietly in the walk-in freezer, her hands shaking as she wrote her mandatory self-critique. The district's employee improvement plan felt more like a humiliation ritual than professional development. Meanwhile, Ethan grew visibly thinner. Some days he arrived without having eaten breakfast, dark circles forming beneath his eyes. The school nurse noticed, but was overwhelmed with 60 students requiring daily medications. During math class the following Tuesday, Ethan collapsed. His teacher called for help. As Jane rushed from the cafeteria, only to be physically blocked by Frank in front of watching students. "Let the nurse handle it." "Mrs. Evans, you're not his mother," he said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. The nurse sent Ethan to the hospital for IV fluids and observation. When Jane asked for his room number, Frank intercepted her. "You're crossing professional boundaries," he warned. That's grounds for immediate termination. That night, Jane sat at her kitchen table, staring at her employee handbook, 22 years of service. But she'd never felt more powerless. She couldn't afford to lose her health care. Not with her arthritis medication costing nearly $400 monthly. Yet Ethan's hollow face haunted her. His parents worked multiple minimum wage jobs, often leaving before dawn and returning after he was asleep. The system designed to catch children like him was riddled with cracks, and he was falling through everyone. Jane wondered if her kindness would only make things worse. She had no idea who was about to walk through the doors. Next, a commotion outside the school, the following Friday afternoon, drew everyone's attention. Students pressed against classroom windows, while teachers tried maintaining order. A gleaming black limousine, followed by 3 imposing SUVs, pulled up to the front entrance. The vehicles bore government plates and small flags that some teachers recognized as military insignia. Frank rushed from his office, straightening his tie. "Is that the superintendent? We weren't notified about a visit." The principal looked equally bewildered. "That's not the superintendent's car." Security guards emerged first, scanning the area with practiced efficiency. Then a tall man, in a decorated Navy uniform, stepped out, his chest heavy with medals and ribbons that even the children recognized meant importance. Beside him, a younger man, in an officer's uniform, followed, standing tall and confident. "Oh my God," whispered the history teacher, recognizing the older man from news broadcast. "Oh, that's Admiral Miller." Frank blanched. "The Joint Chief's advisor. Why would he?" The younger officer's face stopped him mid-sentence. There was something familiar in those features, now filled out and strong, but unmistakable to anyone who had seen him, huddled at the cafeteria's back table. "Is that Ethan, a teacher?" gasped the prestigious group, moved purposefully through the hallways. As the principal hurried to greet them, students and staff parted like water, whispers rippling in their wake. By the time they reached the cafeteria, the entire school seemed to be following. The cafeteria fell silent as the Admiral spoke. "Where's Mrs. Evans?" Jane stood frozen by the serving counter, her hairnet slightly askew from the lunch rush. Frank stepped forward, suddenly obsequious. "Admiral, what an unexpected honor. I'm the district supervisor. How can we?" But the younger officer, indeed Ethan, now grown into his uniform, stepped past him to the microphone, normally used for lunch announcements. "Mrs. Evans," he said, his voice strong where once it had been whisper soft, "you saved me when nobody else would. Today I want to honor you in front of everyone." A camera crew had followed them in capturing the moment. As Jane's hands flew to her mouth 8 years ago, Ethan continued while Frank's face drained of color. "My father was deployed overseas. My mother worked 3 jobs. We had no heat. Sometimes no electricity. I came to school hungry, most days." The Admiral nodded, his expression solemn. "Mrs. Evans didn't just feed me here. She made sure I had food at home. Those are stolen leftovers." Ethan looked directly at Frank. "They kept me alive through weekends when our kitchen was empty." Rumors spread through the crowd as Frank seemed to shrink after Dad was wounded. "We moved near Walter Reed for his treatment. I worked hard, earned a scholarship to Annapolis." Ethan's voice cracked slightly, "but I never forgot who saw me when I was invisible." The Admiral stepped forward, presenting Jane with an official commendation. "Mrs. Evans, on behalf of a grateful nation, we recognize your compassion that changed the course of my son's life." Then came the biggest surprise. Ethan and his father announced the creation of the Evans Angels Scholarship Fund for struggling children throughout the state. Initially funded with $1.5 million, teachers openly wept, students applauded wildly. Frank stood alone, the target of accusatory glances from every direction, forced by public pressure and his suddenly attentive superiors. Frank stammered an apology, which Jane accepted with more grace than most thought he deserved. When finally given the microphone, Jane spoke simply through her tears. "I only wanted one child to feel seen. That's enough for me." As hundreds of students lined up to hug their lunch lady, a transformation rippled through the school in how they saw Jane, how they understood Ethan, and how they recognized the invisible struggles many children silently endured. What began as a secret sandwich became a legend, and the town would never see kindness as weakness again. Jane Evans' story exploded beyond Crestview Elementary. Local news coverage turned national within days. Good Morning America featured her in a segment that left the host teary-eyed. Jane, still wearing her cafeteria uniform, appeared genuinely bewildered by the attention. "I'm just a lunch lady," she kept saying, even as viewers nationwide disagreed. E. Evans Angel Scholarship Fund grew exponentially as donations poured in from individuals, corporations, and even celebrities within months. It provided free lunches to hundreds across the state and college scholarships for dozens. Frank Pearson resigned amid the backlash, but in an unexpected turn found purpose, volunteering at a food bank. "Mrs. Evans taught me what rules can't measure," he admitted in a newspaper interview. 6 months later, the school board unanimously voted to rename the cafeteria Evans Hall, installing a plaque that read, "Where every child is seen." Jane blushed during the ceremony, but stood a little straighter. Admiral Miller and Ethan became regular visitors to Crestview, bringing fellow Navy officers to speak with students about perseverance. Their annual service and sacrifice day became a community tradition, with uniformed personnel serving lunch alongside Jane. The community established Evans Day, when local restaurants offered free meals to any child. No questions asked. Businesses competed to donate the most to local food pantries. Jane formed a lasting friendship with the Millers. She became an honorary grandmother to a growing number of children whose families struggled. Her phone constantly buzzing with texts from kids who knew she'd listen when no one else would. Social media embraced the story, with the hashtag Evans Effect trending as people share their own experiences with unsung heroes. Lunch Lady Hero memes celebrated cafeteria workers nationwide, bringing recognition to one of education's most overlooked professions. Schools across the country implemented Evans protocols, allowing staff discretion to help hungry students without fear of reprisal. Congressional representative cited Jane's story while advocating for expanded school meal programs. The small Illinois town transformed into a national model for compassionate education. Educators visited to study what they called the Crestview approach, where rules serve people, not the other way around. One December evening 5 years later, Jane sat in her newly renovated kitchen, a gift from grateful community members. Through her window, she could see the illuminated sign of Evans Hall glowing in the distance. On her refrigerator hung countless photos. Ethan at his wedding, other children she'd helped now graduating, becoming parents, finding their way. Their cards and letters filled a special drawer she opened on difficult days as she prepared sandwiches for tomorrow's special needs field trip. Jane smiled to herself. One meal isn't just food, it's a chance, a hope, a future. In a world that often rewards rules over hearts, Jane Evans had dared to choose compassion, and in doing so, she proved that sometimes the smallest act leaves the biggest legacy. Share this story if you believe every act of kindness deserves to be remembered. Have you ever seen a simple act change a life? Share your own story below, or type honor if you believe in second chances for the overlooked. Subscribe to Deep Story Dispatch, where justice, honor, and compassion are more than just words.